I was never one for crowded halls or sequined chair covers, yet on the crisp Saturday of Marcus's wedding I found myself standing beneath a vaulted ceiling dripping with fairy lights, pretending not to feel the itch of my rented tux. The place smelled of eucalyptus and fondant. Everyone seemed to twinkle except me, as if the lighting director had conspired to leave one gloomy spotlight solely above my head. Still, I smiled for photographs, raised my glass at the rehearsal dinner, and kept my simmering doubts zipped behind polite laughter. Marcus, 5 years younger and blessed with effortless swagger, drifted through the reception like a sitcom lead in perpetual slow motion. Wherever he paused, champagne appeared, camera shutters clacked, and compliments stacked up like poker chips. When I approached him, he slapped my back with theatrical affection, as though congratulating a teammate for sitting on the bench. He had always been charming, and I had always been the test pattern that played when his channel slept. The speeches began after the third course. Aunt Lillian wept over her note cards. Cousin Derek told an anecdote so obscure that even the punchline carried footnotes. Then Marcus clinked his fork against a crystal flute and announced he wanted to toast his favorite person in the whole wide world. My brother, Andrew. My shoulders loosened for one naive second, only to seize again when he continued, Andrew's had a rough go, bless him. His wife walked out last spring, but at least that frees up his calendar for League of Legends. A roar of laughter shook the chandeliers. I felt every bulb glare at me. I slipped out to the terrace for air. Palm fronds rattled above the hotel garden, and distant traffic sounded like the ocean in a cheap seashell. My phone vibrated in my pocket with a notification from Claire, my ex, reminding me that the dog still needed a walker on Tuesdays. Even divorced, I remained penciled in for chores. The absurdity of Marcus calling me unlucky while standing beside a woman he met 6 months ago for her trust fund felt like satire begging for a laugh track. Back inside, cake was served, and eyes shone with sugar and sentiment. I found the head waiter, a slim man named Vernon, and handed him a thumb drive. At 10:30 sharp, I whispered, "Play the file in the main folder." Projector's already hooked. Vernon raised an eyebrow the way a librarian might when handed a forbidden volume, but nodded all the same. I returned to my seat, nursing a glass of scotch that tasted of cedar and delayed vengeance. 10:30 arrived. The chandelier lights dimmed. The giant screen behind the band flickered to life. A few guests assumed it was the customary slideshow of childhood photos, Marcus dressed as a cowboy, Marcus dribbling a basketball, Marcus glaring at orthodontic headgear. Instead, a grating ringtone filled the hall. On screen, a waveform pulsed. My brother's voice emerged, unmistakable even through speakerphone static. "Look, man, I'm marrying her because she's loaded. I love her, sure, but I love breathing without debt collectors more." A stunned silence replaced the hum of party chatter. Expressions shifted table by table, as though a theater spotlight was fanning across rows. The bride, Madison, went pale enough to match the fondant roses atop the cake. Her father clenched his jaw, so tight his bow tie tilted. Gasps multiplied. Someone knocked over a glass. Marcus shot upright, looking toward the tech booth, but Vernon was already fleeing the room, apron fluttering like a stricken gull. Even from the stage, I could see the panic in my brother's grin vanishing cell by cell. Marcus grabbed the microphone, voice cracking. "Folks, that was taken out of context. You know how guys talk, just blowing off steam." He laughed too loudly, an actor forgetting whether the scene was comedy or tragedy. Nobody reciprocated. I rose, scent of scotch anchoring my calm, and approached the dais. "Out of context?" I asked, lending my voice the crispness of new paper tearing. "Play the rest." But we all knew no further excerpt could unburn the house. The best man tried to block my path, stammering apologies, yet I stepped around him like a pothole. "Madison," I said, meeting her wide, glassy eyes, "if you need the original file, I'll email it. No edits. It's yours." She nodded once, a motion so small it might have been a muscle twitch. Her father stood, face incandescent. He pointed at Marcus with a tremor that contained equal parts fury and heartbreak. "Is that why you insisted on the prenup without alimony?" he asked. Marcus sputtered. Guests began migrating toward exits, chairs scraping in a symphony of retreat. A wedding planner wailed about the timeline unraveling. The band packed up mid-song. I wondered if anyone had paid them in advance or if they'd be sending an invoice marked hazard pay. While chaos filmed the room in static, I walked back to my table, sipped chilled water, and texted Claire a final time. "Dog schedule's yours. I'm setting my calendar on fire." Security arrived, summoned by whom I never learned. Marcus tried to intercept me, but I lifted a palm. "Careful," I whispered, "more recordings exist." His face collapsed inward like wet plaster. He was escorted not to a honeymoon suite but to a service corridor where the hotel manager suggested he wait until tempers cooled. Outside, the moon yawned above Miami's skyline, indifferent yet lovely. I loosened my tie, removed my patent leather shoes, and walked barefoot across the lawn toward the valet station. Madison's bouquet lay abandoned near a fountain. Petals floated like pink question marks in the turquoise water. I considered retrieving it but left it for the night crew, small payment for their overtime. In the taxi, I replayed the evening, not the cruelty of my brother's joke, but the delicate pop of possibility that followed exposure. The car smelled of coconut air freshener and upholstery ambition. When the driver asked whether I'd had a good night, I answered, "Ask me tomorrow." My voice sounded different, as though it had been spruced up by a stylist. Morning arrived with sun blazing against blinds, the world offering blemish-revealing light. Headlines and local gossip sites reported groom abandons reception after gold-digging audio leak. Comment sections teemed with sarcasm and schadenfreude. I brewed coffee strong enough to resurface asphalt and scrolled without guilt. Marcus tried calling twice. I let both rings expire into voicemail limbo. Days bled into weeks. Marcus relocated to a sublet in Fort Lauderdale, silence our only correspondence. Mom attempted mediation, but each phone call ended with her sighing like a windless sail. I started jogging again, filled freezer shelves with balanced meals, and let the apartment become a workshop for a new, unnamed project, salvaging myself. I accepted that Marcus and I now existed on diverging timelines, like trains that once shared track but had switched at a junction invisible to passengers. 3 months later, an envelope arrived, thick cream paper embossed with a fledgling law firm's crest. Inside lay a note from Madison. "Thank you. I deserved honesty more than ceremony." Enclosed is a check. Use it to chase joy. Beneath the note, a check made out for $10,000. I laughed so hard the apartment echoed. Then I endorsed the back and deposited it to fund a cross-country drive. I watched sunsets in New Orleans that tasted of brass bands, climbed red rocks in Arizona that cradled echoing coyotes, and on a quiet Utah morning I deleted the last recording. Revenge had served its course. I no longer needed an artifact to remember why self-respect mattered. Somewhere near Reno, I realized I had begun narrating my life in present tense rather than past. Tonight, months later, I sit in a roadside diner with laminate counters and coffee that could scuff chrome. A teenage busboy hums an out-of-tune ballad while mopping. The neon sign outside flickers, briefly spelling hope. My phone vibrates with an unfamiliar number. For a breath, I consider ignoring it, then swipe answer. Marcus's voice drifts through static, softer, stripped of varnish. He apologizes without excuse, says therapy is teaching him how ego builds mansions on fault lines. He doesn't ask for absolution, only acknowledges the crack in our foundation. Billboard lights ghost past my windshield in silent succession. Advertising fireworks, water parks, miracle mattresses. I glide north along State Route 93 where the speed limit is a polite suggestion. The radio finds a classic rock station mid-chorus. Guitars snarl like satisfied mountain cats. I remember how Marcus used to air drum on the dashboard during family trips. Every cymbal crash accompanied by an exaggerated sneeze because our father disapproved of devil music. Funny how small rebellions foreshadow adult revolutions. Night deepens, and with it the conversation in my head sprawls across deferred dreams. I catalog all the nouns that once defined me: husband, brother, consultant, and wonder which verbs will sculpt the next edition. In the rearview mirror, the diner's sign shrinks to a pink smudge. Ahead, the desert offers blank possibilities the way a fresh notebook offers uncrumpled pages. At a solitary gas station, I stretch beside vending machines glowing like lost satellites. The attendant, a gray-haired woman knitting behind bulletproof glass, greets me with a nod. We discuss fuel prices, the unpredictability of monsoon season, and whether people ever change. She says, they do, but only once they're tired of running into the same mirror. I scribble her phrase on a receipt, grateful for wisdom delivered in the register beep of a midnight transaction. Back on the highway, I imagine Marcus attending group therapy sessions, unlearning reflexive charm. Perhaps he sits in a circle where vulnerability is the price of admission, recounting how greed can masquerade as ambition. I picture him stammering, sentence fragments glitching where brag once flowed. The thought stirs no triumph, only a quiet hope that he is rebuilding on bedrock this time. Dawn unfurls over the horizon like wet watercolor. The sky shifts from charcoal to indigo to sherbet orange, and suddenly the road dips toward a valley stuffed with Joshua trees raising thorny arms to praise whatever weather arrives. I stop to photograph the moment, not for social media, but for the private museum of choices that kept me moving. Each snapshot a timestamp on self-forgiveness. I cross into Idaho by lunchtime, trading sun-scorched vistas for rolling farmland stitched by irrigation canals. A roadside stand sells huckleberry pie. The proprietor, a teenager with braces and a mayoral handshake, explains how a late frost threatened the crop, but resilience tastes like sugar once baked. I buy a whole pie and eat it in the driver's seat, fingers stained violet. It tastes of beginnings disguised as dessert. Memory drifts back to the projector night. I replay the gasp Madison made when she first realized the voice belonged to her fiancé. It was the sound of glass frosting over. I wonder if she has thawed, if she spends evenings reading instead of refreshing bank balances, if betrayal has pushed her toward passions neglected beneath layers of expensive expectation. Perhaps one day our paths will cross at an art fair or volunteer build site, and we'll share a nod that means we both survived the twist. Rain starts near Spokane, sparse drops that tap rhythmically against the windshield like someone practicing Morse code for breathe. I find a motel whose sign promises color TV, even though streaming has conquered analog decades ago. Inside, the carpet smells of synthetic pine, and the walls echo with neighbor arguments translated through drywall. I open the curtains to watch the parking lot puddle reflect sodium street lamps. The scene resembles a low-budget sci-fi set, and I pretend I am a time traveler jotting notes for an intergalactic guidebook. Unable to sleep, I draft a letter to my younger self. Listen, your brother's opinion is not a prophecy. It is a weather vane spinning in storms of its own making. Build your shelter elsewhere. I fold the page and tuck it into the glove compartment, a keepsake for a future impulse. By the time I reach the Canadian border, I have filled 3 notebooks with vignettes. A retired lumberjack teaching me to sharpen knives, a choir of children rehearsing in a Portland park, a bartender in Eugene who poured an extra ounce of bourbon upon hearing my story. None of these strangers knew the gossip columns. Yet each provided a sentence that nudged my narrative toward reclamation. One night in Vancouver, I stand on a pier watching cargo ships litter the bay with lights. A street musician plays a battered saxophone, ringing ballads out of Pacific fog. I toss a coin into his case, and he salutes me with the mouthpiece, as if recognizing a fellow pilgrim. The melody follows me long after I return to the hostel, haunting the stairwell like benevolent smoke. Weeks slip by. My bank balance dips, but my sense of internal equity rises. I take freelance design gigs online, shaping logos for coffee roasters and microbreweries whose owners speak in the tender tones of people nurturing first loves. Their gratitude arrives as digital applause, yet it feels tangible, weighty as river stones. Then a postcard finds me Banff skyline etched in cyan ink. The handwriting is oddly tentative. Andrew, I hope the mountains treat you kinder than I did. Thank you for holding up a mirror before I married a stranger to myself. With cautious respect, Madison. No return address. I tuck it into the latest notebook, an unscripted footnote that softens the edges of that fateful night. Autumn creeps south, repainting forests in ochre and rust. I steer east through the Rockies, choosing switchbacks over interstates. At a viewpoint overlooking ice-blue glacial runoff, I sit on the hood of the sedan and dial Mom. She answers with a tremor that sounds like wine through chimes. We talk about recipes, about how the dog still favors his left paw, and eventually about Marcus. She says he volunteers at a shelter now, walking rescues on weekends because penance should come with leashes and slobbery gratitude. I picture him tying knots and frayed ropes, practicing patience one tug at a time. 2 days later, my phone buzzes with a text from Marcus, a photo of him standing next to a pit bull, both of them grinning with matching crooked teeth. The message reads, "Meet Baxter. He chews lies for breakfast." I reply with a thumbs up and a single line. "Tell him I said Sid." It is a joke, but also a door left ajar. Snow flurries escort me into Montana. I attend a small-town winter festival where locals race homemade sleds shaped like rockets and tacos. Laughter frosts the air. A woman selling knitted scarves asks why I look so amused, and I explain I am collecting proof that joy improvises. She offers a discount, maybe sensing the scarf will join a mosaic of reinvention. I choose one dyed the color of earliest dawn. The hills flatten into Dakotan plains. Here, nothing interrupts the horizon, and I realize some distances cannot be crossed by antagonism, only by the gradual easing of silhouettes into view. I park beside a field lined with wind turbines whose blades revolve in slow applause. Under the giant sky, I practice forgiveness like a language course, conjugating blame into past tense until the grammar feels natural. February meets me in Chicago. The city is a grid of ambition and salted sidewalks. I crash on a friend's couch, trading kitchen cleanup for lodging. One evening, he invites me to an open mic storytelling night. On stage, I recount a version of the wedding saga laced with humor rather than venom. The audience gasps, then laughs at all the beats I once considered bruises. Applause wraps around me like a borrowed overcoat, and I feel lighter stepping off the platform. After the show, a publisher approaches, card embossed with gold initials. She wants an essay expansion, maybe a memoir. I don't promise anything, but the proposition nestles in my chest like a pilot light. Story is salvage. Spring gradient brushes along the lakeshore, and I receive news that Marcus has moved back to Miami to rebuild his career, this time as coordinator for a nonprofit that funds college scholarships. He emails me a mission statement, seeking feedback. I edit gently, lauding the clarity of his new motives. He replies with gratitude and a timid invitation. If your road points south again, I'd cook you dinner. My sedan, loyal but weary, limps into a repair shop outside Cincinnati. The mechanic, an ex-Marine with grease-streaked knuckles, whistles while examining the engine. Repairs will take 2 days. Instead of frustration, I feel relief. Unexpected downtime is a gift. I rent a bicycle and pedal along the Ohio River, waving at tugboats hauling coal. Motion keeps melancholy at bay. I've learned, even wheels smaller than hubcaps can escort healing. During those 2 days, I outline chapters, each titled after a highway number or exit sign representing pivotal conversations. Chapter 6, Exit 407, Forgiveness Station. Chapter 12, Route 29, Dogma Bites Back. The outline hums with potential, an electrical grid awaiting houses. Car fixed, I continue south, following the Appalachian spine like reading Braille across the country's vertebrae. I hike trails that smell of moss and ancient council. On Blue Ridge Peaks, I read aloud an apology to the wind, one I may someday say to Marcus in person, but first must believe myself worthy to voice. By the time I roll into Miami again, humidity clings to my arms like a familiar blanket. Marcus meets me at a food truck park under string lights. He looks different, leaner, steadier. We swap small talk about traffic, about how the Marlins might surprise everyone this season. Eventually, truth steers in. He thanks me, not just for exposing him, but for refusing to let the rupture calcify. We don't hug. Instead, we share a silent clink of soda bottles, carbonation fizzing like new sentences. We sit on concrete steps devouring fish tacos, listening to neither apology nor justification, only present tense observations about the breeze and the playlist overhead. When it's time to go, he hands me a sealed envelope. Inside is a photograph of us as children, building a blanket fort. On the back he has written, "Let's try again." No signature necessary. That night I book a modest studio apartment 10 blocks from the bay. I plan to stay for a month, maybe more, to test whether siblinghood can be renovated like an old porch, one board replaced at a time. I begin mornings walking Baxter beside Marcus, letting the dog decide pace and direction. Some days we speak, others we trail behind silent except for jazz panting and sneaker scuff. On the 30th morning, Marcus admits he attended my Chicago reading through a live stream, pride wrestling embarrassment on his face. He says hearing the room laugh at our story made him believe in second drafts. I tell him audiences laugh because pain narrated honestly becomes communal instead of isolating. He nods, scratching Baxter's ears as though grounding himself within that notion. An email arrives from the publisher. Green light. Contract attached. I consult a lawyer, sign, and celebrate over Cuban coffee so potent it might double as rocket fuel. I dedicate the first chapter to every waiter who has ever risked employment hitting play. I title the book Projector Night, acknowledging the object that pivoted destinies. As pages accumulate, I notice Marcus filling margins with comments, insights, even self-depicting jokes. Collaboration grows where competition once sprawled. We argue over paragraph cadence the way jazz musicians spar over solos, respect bracketing disagreement. The manuscript fattens into a shared ledger, grief and growth tallied in alternating thoughts. The day we send the final draft to the editor, we rent a small sailboat. Neither of us has substantial experience, yet the wind is generous, and the bay extends a forgiving runway. White canvas billows, the hull slices water like a deliberate sentence. We glide until shoreline becomes sketch, and for a rare stretch of minutes, no one on board feels like a failure. Sunset drips molten copper across the horizon as we steer back. Marcus asks if I ever regret revealing the recording. I answer, not regret. Responsibility. Truth needed a stage, but maybe I could have left room for curtains to close softer. He murmurs agreement. Gulls silhouette above us, wing beats punctuating the moment. We dock, tie knots that look amateur but hold. Walking the pier, we share plans. He wants to expand scholarships. I want to tour readings and libraries that smell of dust and potential. Our trajectories remain individual, but we understand the value of intersecting checkpoints. Later, writing at my rented desk, I reflect on how stories rarely end with clean applause. They evolve, chapters bleeding into epilogues that discover themselves mid-sentence. The fallout from that wedding could have fossilized our family in bitterness, yet instead it excavated buried veins of sincerity. I attach the final paragraph, confident the book now breathes on its own. The word count aligns, the spine will bear the weight. I close the laptop and step onto the balcony. Miami's night pulses, horns, laughter, unseen waves smacking seawalls. Somewhere downtown, a projector might flicker at another celebration, broadcasting either nostalgia or revelation. I whisper a quiet wish that whoever presses play next does so with caution and courage. Inhaling salty air, I realize the story is never singular. It is an archipelago of narratives strung by bridges of choice. I smile at the thought and drive on, certain that each mile ahead can be written new.